the queue when we seem to be live. Okay. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is John Payne, and I'm the chairman of the Draft River Plan 2018 Tribunal, appointed by the minister responsible for planning. Along with me are members Carlos Amaral, and who is physically present, and Jennifer Howard, who is with us virtually. Present in the room is technical advisors Tamsin Dorian and Larry Williams, sorry. Also with us is Mandy Shaler, who is our IT consultant. Also, who is present virtually is the director, Victoria Pereira. Due to the current World Health pandemic, these hearings have been held virtually via Cisco WebEx and open to the public via YouTube. However, physical presence is permitted for some records.
Guys, really sorry, it's not working. It's not streaming online.
Can you refresh your page?
I have. I've even called Dolores and it's not working.
And well, yeah, it is live. It's just, yeah, the site is.
It's not.
Okay.
You have a problem, Jennifer?
I have like this, like it shows a picture of you guys, but then when you go to press play, it says video unavailable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine, but I'm not trying to watch the live stream. Like, I'm just fine in the WebEx call.
Okay.
There seems to be some technical problems, so can you give us 1 minute, please? A few minutes, I should say.
I'm just gonna turn off my video.
So it's live for me. I just found the link.
It's live for you on YouTube?
may be some delay in what you're seeing on the website. So in terms of that, it is still recording us live, and what gets embedded will, but in terms of the site, there may be a delay in what's going on in here versus what's being viewed on the site. So it is live, it is going. I would say, carry on.
Vicky, are you here? Are you able to
Yeah,
hear me?
it's not working on my computer.
Yep.
That's your YouTube?
Yeah. Okay.
For those members of the public, we're trying to make sure that you are able to at least follow.
Okay, it's not working on my computer. Okay, guys, you have to press on the YouTube and actually bring up a YouTube browser, and now it works.
Are you set now?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I just think it's the embedding in the site. It's slower, but it's on YouTube. It is streaming, so.
Okay, Vicky, we're gonna continue. In fact, I will start again from the beginning.
It looks like it has like about a 30-second, maybe 45-second delay. Is my
We're
guess.
good now. We're good.
Okay. Here we go. Round 2. Good morning. My name is John Payne, and I'm the chairman of the Draft Murder Plan 2018 Tribunal. Along with me is Carlos Amaral and Jennifer Howard. Ms. Howard is attending virtually. Present in the room is Tamsin Dorian and Larry Williams, who are technical advisors to the tribunal, and Mandy Shaler, who is our IT consultant. Also observing virtually is the director for planning. Due to the current world health pandemic, these hearings are being held virtually via Cisco WebEx and open to the public via YouTube. However, physical presence is permitted for some representatives. The Ministry of Health's recommendations are that only 2 persons per party is permitted in the physical location, which is the boardroom of the Department of Planning. In this room, persons must wear masks unless they are presented. All materials supporting cases have been provided to the members of the tribunal and members of the public via the Department of Planning's website. For those accessing remotely, please be reminded that this is a public hearing and you are visible to others. Please ensure that when you are not speaking, that your mic is muted. There has been some concerns raised, and therefore, as chairman, I have a statement that I would like to read, which I would like in the records. This is a statement that I would like reflected in the records that address changes to process used by the tribunal. Since the appointment of the tribunal by the minister responsible for planning, as chairperson, I have received concerns regarding various steps which have already been promulgated related to the conduct of hearings or the use of specific policies. To ensure due process and to have procedures that are fair and transparent, advice on these matters have been sought from the Attorney General's chambers in consultation with the Director of Planning. As we proceed with these hearings, there may be slight amendments to steps and policies to ensure that the rules related to the conduct of tribunals in general and the procedures used by the Department of Planning permit objectors to have the opportunity to present their case as fully as possible. However, at all times, consideration will be given to the impact any changes may have on cases that previously have been heard. Concerns have been raised regarding the use of the term arable audit, 2, standing on already written submissions, and 3, the opportunity to rebut the position of the Department of Planning. The use of the term arable audit is a matter for the Department of Planning to address. The tribunal is aware of concerns related to the availability of such a document for public view. However, no case has come before the tribunal to date that includes information based on the arable audit. The tribunal is aware that the department has produced a policy statement that aligns its position on the use of information from the arable audit. To be clear, it is for the department to justify before the tribunal any data, regardless of source, it has used to reach its position. Several objectors have decided not to present at their hearing and to rest the position on the original written submission. This is because no new information will be accepted at the hearing. While objectors must make their own decision whether to be present or not, the tribunal would like to point out that this decision could deny the tribunal opportunity to seek clarification on the matter before it. It appears that during the consultation period, objectors, either by perception or otherwise, did not feel that they could rebut the position of the department. This has been a cause of concern, as it seemed to the tribunal that full consultation between the parties may not have taken place. Therefore, a procedural amendment has been made that will permit objectors to present written rebuttals to the department's position. The policy change has been amended as of the 25th of August and published on the Department of Planning website. This has the effect of having several matters that were on today's agenda to be deferred. It is the tribunal's intent to ensure that at the end of this process, objectors believe that they have had the opportunity to fully present their case within the guidelines that are fair and transparent, regardless of the recommendation to the minister. The tribunal will continue to use processes to meet that objective. Now we will go to the first case. We will take a couple of minutes to allow the objector and the Department of Planning representatives to come in. Yeah, what's the process? All right. Could we hand out what we have now? Should we? Yep.
So this is just the rebuttal.
Do you have anything electronically?
You sent it in, it should be a part of
Oh,
packet.
this is
just
about,
the
yeah,
rebuttal.
so I would have sent you guys
Okay.
the rebuttal before the meeting, yeah.
Just show the project your voice. We can be.
Sorry, but Mr. Chairman, can we just have an indication of who's come in, who they are, for my benefit?
Yeah, but as soon as everybody is in, I'll.
Okay, gotcha.
Witness Williams?
We're just
case is number FWD 0220-19, and it is, the location is 8 Long Palm Drive, Pembroke, and the objection is removal of woodland reserve and agricultural reserve. Can the objectors please identify themselves?
Crystal Rodriguez, Botello Architects. Crystal Rodriguez, Botello Architects.
Germano Botello, Botello Architects.
And will the Department of Planning?
Malik Richards, from Department of Planning.
Peter Drew, Department of Environment, Natural Resources.
Thank you. The rules require the objector to state their case. You have 5 minutes to present.
Thank you for letting us present today. I just wanted to point out that I've handed out the rebuttal, which we submitted last week. And what it appears has happened is that the zonings look like they follow the overhead images on Google Earth, but it doesn't take into account the fact that there's actually a lot of development that happens that's not really evident, or that's already existing that's not evident from the Google Earth image. So on this large 11 by 17 sheet that I gave you, the area that's dashed in yellow is actually a brick driveway. And you can see the area in green that overruns it is the woodland reserve as it currently exists. The woodland reserve goes over the existing dwelling and the brick driveway, and it doesn't seem to take into consideration that there's development already on the lot. The agricultural reserve is actually straddling 2 lots. So the piece of it that falls on this lot is the triangular area in red, which we felt is, as an overall parcel of agricultural, it might make sense, but because it straddles 2 lots, it doesn't really make sense. It's also the only agricultural overlay in this whole neighborhood, so it's also inconsistent with the zonings of the neighborhood. The department had proposed. The department had proposed to partially respond to our objection by removing the area of woodland that's over the house, but it would still remain over the driveway. And they also proposed to increase the area of agricultural reserve, which eliminates the small area of developable land, developable base zone between the agricultural and the woodland right now. So we're just requesting that the agricultural be removed to be consistent with other zonings in the area, and that the woodland over the developed area be removed.
Germano Botello. Just to give you a bit more on the site itself, the clients are asking, the property owners are asking for a small cottage, or sorry, a small garage with a wood shop attached. And the location of it can't be anywhere else, or doesn't seem to be anywhere else, aside from on the woodland. The department did come back and said you could put it in this other area, but the client did not want it next to this house, but specifically wanted it in that area. So the actual zoning itself is hindering the full enjoyment of the property owner and his property. I know there's areas where the board can relax the rules, but it seems a bit harsh when he's trying to put it right next to the driveway, so you logically come off the driveway onto the garage, but you can't because this is in place, and this is an application that was actually refused yesterday. We're just hoping that at some point there's more logic into what's real. If there's a driveway and it's zoned woodland or arable, I think the reality is it's not going to change. However, the department thinks that agriculture and woodland can be brought back once it's a driveway and it's the main way to get into the property. that's not gonna happen. And I would ask the department that at some point, I think the department has to forget about keeping the number that they have from an outsider's point of view, and from being on the other side of the table on the last tribunal. The department has to get real and realize that some of that number is not coming back. If it's a driveway and it's the only means into the property, it's not coming back. You have to adjust those numbers to be real instead of holding on to a number and a percentage and just say that you're not going to let go arable land. At some point, it has to be a moment where the department realizes that.
Have any questions asked, Scott?
The difficulty there we're tasked with, I'm looking at the overall picture of the property and how it is. It's not incumbent on me to decide where what gets done or proposed projects on the property. The key for individuals such as myself that are involved in agriculture is obviously a landowner never sees the true value in something like that because it's the aspect of maintaining the property. It's a grass area, it's everything else. The position tends to be, we've got to look at the food security issue. Is this a major player in the agriculture program in Bermuda? Cultivated plot? No, it's not, because it's not in production like the majority of the other ones that are out there that private landowners do not have in cultivation for whatever reason. I'm looking at it from the overhead view. You've got that adjacent property there, the boundary lines there, and you've got property that borders on the other side of it. This could have been subdivided back in the original was sold off, but I'm looking at it where it could have been and quite easily can be a viable piece of agricultural land for production based on what you're seeing as overhead. I'll be honest, I haven't physically been there and done a site visit, and there's many of these throughout there. I know Peter within his remit and Tommy, tasked with being the eyes and viewing these properties for what potential is there. As I see it, as a no pun intended expert in the field, it's an asset that, as an island, we have to kind of protect. If anything, it's been highlighted after this whole pandemic, what we've been going through, the disaster stuff. It's a difficult one.
We understand that point, but in this particular case, if you look at the physical structures, the building is there, and that probably is not going to move, and the arable land is at his front door, which then would tell you that the house is probably not going to go away, and to have the arable land in his path, walking path to the front door is quite, it doesn't make sense. And what we're saying is, we're not trying to take it all away. We're just saying there has to be some reasonable give and take of arable and so on. And aside from this, and my last comment was general to the whole department. I have arable on my driveway. My driveway is not going to go away. It's your choice to take away the arable or not. But my driveway is not going to go away. Aldera Laundromat, if you look at that site, the entire site is arable up to the building. Now, we know a third of it is parking. Parking is not going to go away for that building. There has to be some reasoning to say that arable is gone and it's not coming back. Right next to it, same property. There is arable, it's farmed, it's used, it's beautiful. But I think there has to be some point reasoning of the department to say, listen guys, reality. Colin Smith is not going to rip out his driveway to do arable. Just isn't.
Sorry,
Senator, do you have a question?
well, I feel slightly at a disadvantage because there's reference to a physical plan that I don't have. So Can somebody point me to that online? I mean, I've got the map up and stuff like that, but for example, I don't know where the driveway is. I
Jen,
need somebody
that
to
was
walk me
emailed to
through that.
Vicky. That was sent in the rebuttal package. Did you get
Okay.
that this morning when we sent over the, so if you open up the rebuttal package for 22019.
Okay, let me open that. Because I didn't find it online. I guess that's not been posted.
No, it should definitely be on the CSS. I mean, I can go and check and see if the technical officer made it available online. It is? Okay.
It's under the rebuttal.
Okay, sorry, I do see that now, but okay, now I can see an aerial photo that I couldn't find before, so that's showing me where the driveway is. Okay, that's better. That's helpful. Okay, that's fine.
Brandon, you want to present? You can take your mouth out. While you speak.
Can you go put it on the share drive?
Can you talk through it based upon what's already there?
I can, yeah. Represent. Okay, so my name is Philippe Richards, representing the Department of Planning with regards to this objection. With regards to the first issue, I've reviewed it with the reserve where the development has already occurred. The existing house and boathouse were both built on a keel back in 2005 as there was a limited an unencumbered development area on the site, and compensation for this development was the implementation of a woodland management plan, which I have a copy of here with me. And this woodland management plan was, be helpful if I had the map, but yeah, if you see, notice the light green line on the north and south of the property. That is the extent of the approved woodland management plan from 2005. The zoning was, we have proposed the new zoning to much more align with the approved woodland management plan, which includes the large avocado tree in the driveway. And also to the point that part of it is a driveway. Driveways are allowed through woodland reserve areas under the draft Bermuda Plan 2018 policy.
Sorry, speak up just a little bit more. Just a little bit more, yeah? Okay. Thank you, sorry.
Driveways are permitted in woodland reserve conservation areas under the draft Bermuda Plan 2018, policy number WDR 5. And there was also a counter objection from the Bermuda Environmental Sustainability Task Force where they outlined that woodland areas should be preserved as habitats, windbreaks, visual and natural relief, regardless of whether they contain endemic, native, introduced, or invasive species. And it is considered that our proposed amendment to the woodland reserve will better reflect the on-site conditions, which clearly show that there is no tree or vegetation growth due to the approved construction of the residence some years ago, and will better reflect the area of the approved woodland management plan. Also, our proposed zoning amendment is recommended that we also increase the area of agricultural reserve to fill in the gap between the approved woodland management plan and the existing agricultural zoning, which is the small triangle you can see between the light green and the brown line. With regards to the second issue, the removal of the agricultural reserve, the department does not agree with the objector's claim that the agricultural reserve zoning is irregular and random, inconsistent with zonings around the Agars Hill area, as there are a couple of other agricultural zone areas in the neighborhood, around the Point Shares area. And also, this site was zoned as arable in the Bermuda Plan 1992, as well as agricultural reserve in the Bermuda Plan 2008, and no objections were received to the zonings in those plans. Also, according to aerial photos dating back to 1941 and also 1981, we can see that the area zoned as agricultural reserve has been consistently been farmed since then, but has stopped in recent years. And BEST also objects to the removal of the agricultural reserve, stating that Bermuda must be able to rely on an already reduced amount of agricultural land to be able to grow food for its population should the future need arise. Also, the Department of Planning and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources consider that this agricultural reserve meets the objective of agricultural zonings, which is to conserve all important agricultural land to support agricultural, farming, and horticultural uses. And we deem that with a long history of arable use, this is considered to be an ideal site for a home garden and worthy of retention as an agricultural reserve. In summary, the department partially supports the objection by proposing an amendment to the woodland reserve to recognize existing development and woodland areas. And we also propose a slight amendment to the agricultural reserve.
Have any questions? Jennifer? You have anything to add?
At your disposal, sure.
That's why you're here.
Okay, no, just a couple points. The objector stated that it straddles two lots. There are similar and many multi-parcels that straddle multiple ownerships throughout the island, so it's not irregular in that regard. From an environmental standpoint, it's a low sheltered valley. It is bottom of a large hillside, which improves soil moisture, soil migration into the field, and is well above the high tide mark, so it doesn't get affected from swells or sea level rise, etc. in the near term. It could be farmed tomorrow if someone was so inclined. It could be planted with fruiting trees and shrubbery. It could be used as an out-of-ground plant nursery, all of which is permitted under the current zoning. It could be used as a hobbyist greenhouse or in part to support active home gardens. It's got from our averaging island-wide, it has a good size and good soil quality. In respect of the woodland reserve portion that the planning department has emphasized in regards to what was approved under a woodland management plan when the original house was applied for, the large tree there is a 60 to 100-year-old plus. It appears to be an avocado. It doesn't appear to be fruiting, but it is a large canopy tree, which is a unique specimen for the island. And roadways have always been supported as an adjunct to woodland reserves or agricultural reserves for farm vehicles, and because you can pass underneath trees, etc. Thank you.
Having said all of that, what could be done to give the objector, the owner of the property, what they, the ability to build a garage in the location that they want? Unless I'm I'm asking the planner. If I'm mistaken, the objector would like to be able to build a garage just off the driveway, close to his house, but in doing so, he would impede upon woodland reserve. What is there any give?
Excuse me, just for clarity, the building they're looking at as a detached building, not close to the house, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's going to be earmarked in this area as opposed to somewhere closer to the house. just for, just for
Okay,
the
thanks.
sake.
Correct.
That area that they're proposing was an area that was meant to be under the woodland management plan, and as such should have been planted out in accordance with the approved plan. And that's why we have shown that the green line would be in contradiction of the approved woodland management plan.
Mandy, can we share screen and can somebody point out to me exactly where we're talking about in terms of the proposed detached building?
The one we just had on, or do you want the online map?
Whichever one you want to
Online
share,
map,
just
Ariel? Wanna do
Yeah,
that?
the online one was
Okay,
that.
bear with me a moment.
So we're looking really, so where are we looking to build?
Yeah, you go up.
Please.
Actually, it's easier to come point over this way, actually.
Because then Jen can see it, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
we're-
Sorry,
we're-
keep pointing and I'll use the cursor.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll-
It's here, the driveway is here, and just off of the driveway, so you come off the driveway onto the garage. Thereabouts, thereabouts.
okay.
Can I answer a little of the question you asked of planning?
Yeah.
The way that the initial building was approved was on appeal. The only way we can actually get that garage and little hobby shop is the department refused it yesterday. Now we have 21 days to appeal to the minister. So our process is a lengthy, costly one, just as the initial house was. Because the department, would not move on that. You've got the right question. How do you make it work? The department would not, and has not historically moved on. It has to be appealed to the minister.
Why would the owner not want to build closer to the house?
This is a house that is in a trust and it will be handed down to family members. If you want to build a room onto it because things change, they would not, that garage could impede further development to the immediate house.
But, this is a question, it's not my area of expertise, but, I mean, that would be considered an ancillary building off to the side as opposed to attached to the house, so it seems that would complicate, again, not my field of expertise, but it would seem like that would complicate subdivision or trust, later on down the line, having a separate building as opposed to an ancillary building.
The ancillary building, I'm calling it wood shop, but it could be for, if things change, and as Mr. Drew said, things could change, that ancillary building could be used to house farming. It's a garage that is potentially could be a 2-car garage, car, bike, wood shop, or ancillary to the agricultural, as we talked about things possibly changing. So it could be that. In addition to that, the same trust, the same property owner owns the property right next to it, which abuts the garage.
The adjacent
Yes.
portion of the arable land further down?
No, the one to the back.
One to south of the drawing of the image. That property is also owned, correct, by the same property owner. So at this point, the property owner can't even give himself permission to be a little closer to the lot line because the department will not allow it.
Any other?
Is the proposed building to affect the avocado that we heard about?
No.
The only point I would make is that our department's concern is that the development, once you have a standalone building, would progress toward being a residence and, let's say, a nanny cottage or a small cottage. Not once you get your foot in the door, it does open up the opportunity for further development and additions, encroachment, et cetera, which impacts the environment.
Can I, one more question? You got one more question?
It's a comment in that I don't feel it's right, or it's the mandate of the department to assume that that will be anything other than what's being requested. If that's a request to change it to a residential unit, then the client would have to make a request to the department for an assessment number. So it's out of line for anyone in this department, any department, to assume. I think you have to judge on what's presented.
So to know your argument, you get killed when you say that because it is a trust, that they may want to add on to the house and give, so you can't tell planning they shouldn't presume when you expect them to presume that the house may be built on. It's it's one of those.
Understood. Okay.
Right. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Carlos?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you guys very much for attending, and we'll deliberate and make your recommendation to the minister.
Appreciate your time.
Hold a second. Mr. Williams have to guide you up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Vicky, was the volume okay?
And we're still live.
For the most part, the volume was good. Apparently too loud for Jen now.
Sorry, I think I had turned it way, way up to hear some of the mics in that room. It's hard to hear, but then when somebody else is on the call, it's very loud. So I have to manage
Yes.
my volume better. So we're kind of expecting the next people to come right in the next couple of minutes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're just gonna clean the tables as per Department of
Super.
Health. And then Larry will go and get them.
I think it's too, I just.
I'm just going to step away for a minute and a half. I'll be right back.
Okay.
When we're doing it in between.
Yes.
Would you like me to mute
Yeah.
all?
Sorry, but you guys in the boardroom are on mute, so I can't hear anything.
I have now unmuted. We were muting also between shuffling around, so we are
That's
live
all right.
and unmuted. No, wait, there's a computer over here.
Colin, are you presenting, do you need the computer for your presentation? Okay.
Okay. For case number FWD 0218-19, removal of woodland reserve 19 Rosemont Avenue, Pembroke. For the objectors, we have,
Colin Campbell.
take it off, please.
Colin Campbell from OBM.
Jennifer Davidson from OBM. Jennifer Davidson from OBM.
And for the Department of Planning,
Nathan Frick, representing Department of Planning.
Peter Drew from the Department of Environment, Natural Resources, Terrestrial Section.
okay. Mr. Campbell, you're the objector. You have 5 minutes.
Very good. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I do appreciate your time and the opportunity to present our case. We were first alerted to a conservation issue in 2018 regarding a tree had been cut down, and neighbors had alerted the department that there was work going on in a woodland reserve area. We came in after the site had been cleared, but there was one or two things that were quite apparent. The stump of the offending Mexican pepper was sitting in a development zone, but yet it extended itself out over 25% of the woodland reserve area. Now let's go back and have a look-see at that property itself. It was part of a larger section seen by the 1940s and others, where they had a main house, a groomsman's cottage, and a barn. And the area in question was in fact a paddock for the horse, carry the master of the house back and forth to various plants. Well, after 1947 and all that, cars came in, the horse wasn't eating so much, and the paddock was allowed to go to seed, regrettably. And in the last decade or so, Mexican peppers and balloon vine and other invasives had largely overtaken the site. And so the new owner taking control of the site and wishing to tidy it up, exercised the opportunity to get a landscaper in who did the business. And hence there was a concern, and we're here now. In looking at the challenges, there was three things that were quite obvious. The owner's intention would like to provide a lot for his son. He's got two sons, and has given one house to one son, and would wish to develop the lot for a second home. And we proposed to the department back in February of 2019 just such a solution, indicating a proposed subdivision at the site with two 12,000 square foot lots, and providing a small property, a modest structure that would sit similar to the one it's adjacent buddy, but ring fenced with woodland variety plants and the like. Now, the value of the property right now is with invasives and all sorts of other plants. It doesn't make for a great woodland reserve in the truest sense of providing an environment for birds and other wildlife. The other wildlife in the departments in the woodland reserve commentaries is particularly interesting when you want to consider what other wildlife are we considering to create an environment for. What we do know, that site has provided a very capable wildlife location for feral cats and rats, as it turns out, or as the owner likes to call them, roof rabbits, because they just hop from tree to tree to tree and into the house. So what we proposed to do was to place the house fairly centered in the lot, and then ring the entire property with woodland plantings, both upper story and secondary story and shrubs, and applying the rationale of the habitat that birds would best use. Birds not only like to nest in trees, but they need open spaces for other feeding. And we've also suggested that fruit trees are also good for the bird's environment. The fruit rotting on the ground creates a habitat for bugs, which helps the birds and the like. So we were pretty much advised that this wouldn't work, that we had to put back a CMP, conservation management plan, that put plants back into the area that was otherwise cleared. Well, we were compelled to do that because it was holding up a building permit for the renovations of the house next door. So we were sort of over a barrel, but we still thought that this was still the best solution. So we went ahead and submitted a CMP, and the plants that are all in are all endemics, and they are easily movable and all that sort of stuff. So we fit the bill. So the pattern language of the street, though, would suggest that looking up and down Rosemont Avenue, you have on either side, you have development of one sort or another. That this little patch here is in fact the leftover of a paddock and is not necessarily contiguously tied to the other zoning of the Woodland Reserve, but forms what's better a cluster or even a stepping stone approach for bird migratory patterns and nesting. So the proposal that we put forward in February was to allow for a small development, a modest development, ring fence it with woodland quality plants and the like, and provide an environment which the urbanized birds of Bermuda could actually live in. They're not living in there now. That was, as I said, rejected, and so we're back at this point now, objecting to the zoning. So there's a couple ways out of this challenge. You either appeal to yourselves to remove this little patchwork of Woodland Reserve completely, or what we proposed back in February of 2019 is to ring fence the property and maintain the quality and the ideas of a woodland reserve, or just forget it altogether, which the client doesn't wish to do. So the point really is that are the Woodland Reserve goals actually being satisfied on this patch of property? We would argue no, they're not, because they're providing a very capable environment for rats and feral cats, and the birds are not going to be drawn to that. And there is better use of that site, which is the other issue here. Now, as it turns out, buried right inside the Woodland Reserve, okay, real quick, right inside the Woodland Reserve is a clause that refers back to Zone 11, which we refer to in our commentary, that allows for a modest development inside a Woodland Reserve. Now, foolishly, I didn't see that back in February. I wish I had, but anyway, what we do now say that there are at least two, not trying to be pugnacious, but there are at least two different ways of looking at this. Eliminates the Woodland Reserve completely, or apply the restrictions and opportunities of Zone 11. And to that point, we'd be happily guided, but the fact of the matter is that this site is next to Hamilton, it's a suburban type development. It's within an easy walking distance. It meets the goals of development, careful development here in Bermuda.
Tribunal is okay with this. We do have PowerPoint presentation. I'd like to, in the interest of being impossible task, being both brief and detailed. Which weapon?
No, unfortunately, you're going to have to take control of, is it linked to the?
Gotcha.
So it's now.
Shared.
Okay, I also need you to keep your volume up, please.
Oh. Is this good enough projection?
Yep.
Cool. So yes, as the objectors pointed out, this is the objection that was received by the Department of Planning to remove the Woodland Reserve Conservation Area for 19 Rosemont Avenue. The department has been able to review the rebuttal, but we haven't had a chance to really analyze it further. So we're presenting this on behalf of the original objection that was submitted, which was to remove the Woodland Reserve in its entirety. So just give you a brief little interest into the site and surrounding area. So 19 Rosemont Avenue, for those who need a landmark, is literally across from Ascot's and Rosemont Hotel. Hope that makes it a little bit easier to understand where we are. The area itself is, and the surrounding areas, is more of a medium to low density residential area, kind of punctuated by large mature gardens and pockets of woodland going up and down Rosemont Avenue. Many of the houses are of the listed building from the Victorian era times, and with that comes the established gardens and large trees that kind of accompany the site features. We feel that this site in question is similar to the surrounding area and not unique. We can divide into two sections, as Campbell pointed out. There is a north section that is densely vegetated with a mix of both native and invasive species. And on the south side, we have our residential house, which is a grade 3 listed building, complete with a driveway and a detached garden shed, which is fairly large, which I believe was previously the barn, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So just giving you a wider perspective, and the zonings of the property, zoned entirely residential 1, as is consistent with much of the development along Rosemont Avenue. Also, of it, just over half of the property is part of a woodland reserve conservation area, which is shown as the green hatch on the map. And if you also notice the red concentric circles with the black dots, those are represented as listed buildings. As you can see, there's quite a few in the area. So it kind of shows the continuality of the property in relation to the surrounding neighborhood. And as mentioned, the crux of the objection is related to the northern part of the site, which is the removal of the woodland reserve conservation area. So this was the very first site visit photo that we took. This was back in early 2019. As Mr. Campbell pointed out, an area of the woodland reserve was cleared out. Further details could be forwarded to enforcement who dealt with the matter. In order to rectify this situation and to remediate the woodland that was lost, we did require the submission of a conservation management plan, considering that the woodland was illegally cleared in a conservation area, and that's the procedures were done. So this is the kind of a screenshot, and I believe on the CSS is the approved conservation management plan in detail available to see. This shows the area that in the hatch that was affected, and this is the area that has been kind of replenished. This was approved by the Department of Planning in, I believe, March of 2019. This was under consultation from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources and the Terrestrial Officer, who is here today. We came back and forth, and this was the agreement that we thought was best to remediate and enhance the area that was previously part of the woodland, that is part of the woodland reserve conservation area. Our position is that we wish to retain that and continue with the existing conservation management plan, as we believe this is something that has gone through proper channels of consultation and has subsequently been approved. And I wouldn't steal too much of Denner's point, but this will be they were not in support of removal of the reserve. Cool. Also, just for the interest of the board and the general public, during the time this conservation management plan was submitted, we did have a subdivision application that was submitted. This, I don't know if you guys can see the black line. I have to bounce. Okay. Anyway, there's you might be able to see a black line that's dissecting the property into 2 lots, basically isolating the northern half of the woodland reserve and the southern half residential area. This was refused by the Development Applications Board, and this was done after the approval of the Conservation Management Plan. The rationale behind that from the board, as put into writing and made public, was that the existing northern lot did not have sufficient development area for a house. But that's not to say that the department was sympathetic to this. In 1992, this was the existing zoning. As you can see, the woodland reserve is part of a larger tract of woodland reserve that went down towards the Belly Estate and Rosemont Hotel, kind of like this long thing parallel to Rosemont Avenue. We removed a section of that in the 2008 plan, not only to reflect on-site conditions of the existing barn, but to also give a bit of a development area for the the owners at that time who wish to, if they wish to do additions or extensions to the existing barn. Cool. So as part of the Woodland Reserve objectives, the Woodland Reserve objective is to protect and enhance woodland areas which are of ecological, aesthetic, or functional importance. The Department of Planning believes that Woodland Reserve conservation areas should be applied to objectives that meet at least some or all, if not all of those requirements. And we feel that it applies, that all 3 points do apply to this Woodland Reserve area. For instance, in the functional side of things, we believe that the Woodland Reserve acts as a substantial buffer when paired in tandem with the existing pocket of larger tract of Woodland Reserve that extends downward, kind of preventing the urban sprawl moving into the lower to medium lower density residential areas to the west of the island. Provides that vegetative buffer, almost a green belt, if you will. From a functional side, this is from the latest site visit that we kind of conducted actually just a few weeks ago. This is just to note that the character of the Rosemont Avenue neighborhood does feature more of a prominent of a large mature specimens of trees, coupled with existing gardens with Victorian architecture, and this kind of complements by providing those natural buffer breaks of vegetative areas that kind of complement the existing character, providing that aesthetic importance. And then finally, with the submission of the conservation and implementation of the conservation management plan, we see the Woodland Reserve as being not only protected but enhanced, and that fulfills the Woodland Reserve objectives of protecting and enhancing the woodland area. So just in summary, that the Department of Planning seeks to retain the Woodland Reserve in its entirety. That is our recommendation. We believe that the lot contains an existing development area prior to with the 2008 amendment, permit plan amendments. And we also feel that the department's position that the Woodland Reserve fulfills all objectives outlined in Chapter 20 of the Woodland Reserve in draft permit plan 2018. Yeah.
Any questions? Jennifer?
No, thanks.
Okay, I have no questions. Is there, during your consultative process, why wasn't you able to have a meeting of the minds?
The sensibility we had was that there was a sense of grievance regarding the clearing of the site or clearing of the lot, which was not following proper procedure and stuff like that. We were called in after the fact and tried to find out and had a couple of conversations with the department to try and find out what was the best avenue. We also had, at the same time, we had a development for internal renovations of the main little cottage. That was, we were told nothing would be approved, occupancy permits would not be granted for that work until it was done. And so we looked at, say, well, here's a reasonable way to get through the whole business together. And in our February submission, and that was turned down and said, no, well, that won't do. You have to put it right back into that piece of property. I think the thing which is quite stunning is that the actual tree in question that was taken out was in the area just to the west of the barn, had spread so far into the barn, into the main house, and across the yard that taking out that one Mexican pepper cleared that enormous great area. Now there was a palm that was found left over, and there were other invasives in and around that area. But in no way, shape, or form could you say that that was a quality woodland. And one of the complaints of the property people who were renting before was the roof rabbits, the number of vermin that were living quite happily in that site next to the hotel and the garbage bins and all that sort of stuff. So in terms of a quality woodland, that hardly would account. And again, in not trying to be pugnacious, but saying, look, there's something we can do here. Let's clear away the invasives and let's plant in those trees in that environment that actually creates a woodland environment, which you are supposedly trying to be chasing up here, say, providing a habitat. So if we can plant habitat, that's going to do a whole lot better than leaving trees that are non-functional for nesting purposes or much in the way of food purposes for the birds. So it's not a question of ignoring the woodland reserve overlay, but applying good, sensible woodland management structure to the site, which doesn't exist. And so not knowing enough about the other properties all the way down the line, I dare say they may also suffer from the same lack of care and attention. And that does not enhance woodland or does encourage people to consider developing woodland. In terms of a woodland development, if one wants to take their logical thing, Bermudians used to cultivate cedars all the time. And so in this instance here, say, okay, well, I'll apply this as a woodland development. I'm going to plant cedars as close as I can. And in 20 years' time, I want to cut them all down because I'm going to use the cedar. And then we'd have another, we'll push back and say, well, you can't do that because this is a woodland. The question really is, what is the value of this zone on this property? Is it actually achieving what it sets out to do? We don't believe it does. We understand that there's a pattern language that exists. It's an urban, suburban pattern language since the time the houses were built. It's been that way since it was first laid out. It's just as a consequence of neglect that the invasives have overtaken the spot. So working towards the center, the woodland reserve zoning has provision for a house of modest size and means to be developed in this area, and it's very clearly prescribed. And failing a removal of the zoning, we would then say we would like to apply that because we think we can provide a much better environment. In our most recent submission, we also submitted a treatise written in tandem with Bermuda Magazine and David Wingate and others about habitat for birds. What do you actually need? Okay.
Okay.
So.
Chaz from the department side. When we were notified of the, I don't know, can you hear me? Sorry, a little conscious of that. When we were notified of the illegal clearing in the woodland reserve, the stance of the department was that any method to rectify the woodland reserve that was cleared must conform with the woodland reserve objectives set out in the plan, which is not only to protect the woodland reserve, but to enhance the woodland reserve. So that's why when this was done in enforcement and the requirement of the conservation management plan was required in order to remediate that. And it is the department's position that the conservation management plan submitted upon consultation with the terrestrial officer who knows more about plantings and endemics and natives than we do, was of a quality that will enhance the woodland reserve, and we were happy to approve that. We thought it was of good quality. So that's why we moved forward with that. That answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the panel, from the tribunal? If there's no further questions, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you indeed. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take a look. Take some new guidance.
Mandy, do you know you're on mute again? Okay.
Mandy, did you see my message?
We're going to deal with case number FWD 0222-19, and it is 8 Riddle Spade Wood Ward, and the objector is Bonita Jones is asking to reduce the area of agricultural reserve. Ms. Jones has decided to stand on her written submission and has not offered a rebuttal to the position of the department. Therefore, for the department, can you indicate who you are, please?
Ken Campbell. Excuse me, Ken Campbell.
And you've got to be reminded that you're not just speaking to me, you're speaking to others who are not here, so your volume will be appreciated. So, according to Ms. Jones, she said, I wish to reduce the extent of the agricultural reserve covering my property to accommodate a parking area. I do wish to retain some agricultural reserve at the southern end of the property. I do understand that the property is covered by a Section 34 legal agreement, but I have written to the Minister of Home Affairs to seek an amendment to the Section 34 in order to reduce the extent of the protected land to enable increased parking on the property. I do understand that both processes, the Bermuda Plan objection and the amendment of the Section 34, will have to align, but would like the Department of Planning to consider an amendment to the agricultural reserve in any case. So, you're free to speak.
I can go up there for my presentation.
Yeah, the presentation is queued up. I'm just going to share the screen. And then I will have it go live here. And then it is all yours.
Okay, this is objection reference FWD 022219, and the objection issue is the proposed removal of a section of agricultural reserve. Property is outlined in blue here and is located at 8 Riddlesby Road, Warwick. And just to orientate you, this is the Heron Marketplace here, and this is Price Right on Middle Road here. And this is Middle Road, as you can see just here. Riddlesby Road leads up from Middle Road in northerly direction, and this is the objection site, which contains an apartment building here in the northern portion of the site and an agricultural reserve in the southern portion of the site here. And this is an aerial image of the site, so this is Riddlesby Road, travelling north, and vehicular access into the site is provided via this estate road, runs along the western boundary of the property. This is the access point in here. There's also another vehicular access along the eastern boundary, which is provided via right of way, and you can take access via this location here. There is an internal driveway which runs along the northern boundary, eastern boundary of the property, and there is parking provision in the western part of the site here, and on this site as well, the landowner has a valid live planning consent for a garage in this part of the site in the northeastern corner. There's also this area of hard surfacing which has been created just outside of the agricultural reserve. So the map on the left here shows the area which is proposed for removal from the agricultural reserve by the objector, and it amounts to approximately 3,500 square feet. The map on the right, also in red, again it shows the area proposed for removal from the agricultural reserve, but crucially on this site there's also a Section 34 agreement in place, and that's what the blue outline shows. And as the Department Position Report notes, that's protected, legally protected for agriculture, for horticultural purposes. So I just want to make clear, regardless of the outcome of this process, the zoning process, that land will continue to be protected for horticultural purposes in accordance with the legal agreement. So I have some images of the site. This is the one on the left is looking northwest, and you can see the apartment building just at the top of the photograph, and the area covered by tree over here. This is part of the area which is And this is the area of hard surfacing, which I indicated on the earlier map, which is just outside of the agricultural reserve. But it is actually within the Section 34 agreement area. This is looking west from that area of hard surfacing, the photograph on the left, sorry. The Wand area here forms part of the agricultural reserve, which is proposed for removal. This is the southern part of the site, which is quite overgrown, but contains a number of fruit trees. The department has recommended that the agricultural reserve be retained in full, and the reasons for that, as outlined within the department position report, are, as I said, there's a Section 34 legal agreement in place which legally protects the agricultural land, and the department would not recommend undermining that legal agreement by having a land use position on the site which conflicted with that agreement. There's an existing parking provision within the site, as I've noted. The department generally is not supportive of the loss of agricultural reserve land, and also in this site is a residential two-zone site. And the hard surfacing limitation has already been reached, which is set at 40%. Under policy RSD 16 of the draft Bermuda Plan 2015. So even if the zoning and Section 34 area was removed, they may not actually get consent to create an additional area of surfacing within that part of the property.
Yeah. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you very much.
Those are the three cases that are up for discussion today, and therefore the public viewing of this hearing is now closed. Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope that it has been of some use to understand our